Hi everybody, it's Barry here after a week off in Chicago. Welcome to Deshamsha. We've had a kind of a wonderful time with Navamsha. I mean, you know, there's so much there, and I'm glad we spent that much time with it. It also helped us see a number of techniques that we can use and practice on Navamsha, and then we can apply those to some of the other Vargas charts. So now we're moving into Deshamsha, the D-10 chart. We're going to spend 2 weeks with it. I will have class next week. I had originally had it scheduled. If you're traveling for Thanksgiving, you can listen to the tape. It's just a very deep subject. We probably could have 4 lessons on it. And that's, as we know, all this stuff is very, very rich. And it's always a problem. I actually even have added, showing that we're having audio problems. Let me unmute you all, and then you can mute yourselves. So I've just unmuted you all, so you can mute yourselves again. It gives you control over the mic. How is the sign? How is the sound? It's telling me that we're having audio problems, and I'm trying to close up anything that's not closed. Let me close. It's very funny. I think we're good. So let's start with some chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Vakritunda Mahakaya, Surya Koti Samapraha, Nirvigyam Kurame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada. Dhyanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Manchamulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vivishai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangale Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukra Shanibhischa Rahuve Ketave Namaha. Okay, honoring Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, cognizer of the Vedas, and my holy tradition going back to Brahmananda Saraswati. Again, I always stand on the shoulders of many great teachers, Sanjay Rathkal, Sutton Bill Levacy in particular. Jamie, I don't know if Jamie's here today. She's been watching tapes lately. She's working hard. I think we finally got the edits done on the blind spot. So it's going to Amazon again for a second edition, hopefully. Catherine's here. We probably have lots of snow in Alberta. I know we have lots of snow here. It's like 2 inches of snow, 3 inches. John Miller's usually watching tapes. Mohini's here from Australia. Brooke is here from Seattle. Audra is not here today. She's been watching tapes, been pretty busy. Afi's here from San Diego. Tori is here. Naomi's here for a little bit today. Diana is here. Cheryl said she was coming, so she's not quite here yet. Donnie's here from the UK. Julie's not online yet. And Sundar is also not online yet. Gita's here. And Rand's here. Hopefully I'll get to see you in Sedona. I don't know. Anyway, our schedule is such that we're doing D10 part 2 here next week. It probably needs 3 weeks, but we're going to do 2 weeks. There'll be no class December 2nd, so you get a week off to study. I may have some bonus tapes to send you. I probably don't. So you get a week off. December 2nd, if you're going to be in Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference, come see me at my talk, which is first thing on Friday morning on the secrets of the third house. And then when I come back, we'll go into Draken. We may switch D60 with Draken. I've done a lot of work on the D60 class already, and it's actually really, really important, and it's probably kind of earth-shattering, so we'll probably do D60 when I come back. Blind Spots book, we do have hammered out another level of corrections on it. For those of you who haven't bought it yet, it's actually $19.95 as a PDF download. And it is up on Amazon, but the corrections have not been gone to Amazon. So probably wait 10 days if you want a hard copy on Amazon. Jamie's still hacking it out. Vargas 2 class is going to start January 20th. I know some of you have signed up. If you have an interest in the class, let me know. It just helps me kind of plan my timing and such like that. If you need any special considerations, please email me. Also, the early bird is $2 now through December 7th. Kind of excited about Vargas 2 because no one really kind of teaches this material, so I'm kind of excited to go here. Okay, I did add a new class for January now on Saturdays. I just sent you a thing. I'm going to teach an updated advanced version of my transit class. That's starting on January 19th. I haven't listed it here. Transits, and most of you may know, transits is my specialty because I've been kind of really studying them and watching them, observing them for 25, 30 years, and I seem to understand them a lot better than a lot of people and how they kind of manifest in your lives. And so I've added, I had a class 2 years ago, and I've added let's do it now, and so I'm going to be teaching that. And some new material, so I'm excited about that. And it's kind of a fun thing. Okay, so let's go to the lesson. So I have a new slideshow. I'll send it to you when I'm done. It's the revised version. I've added about 30 slides, which obviously we're not going to cover all of this week. This material is endless, but we do have to start somewhere. I'm particularly have to acknowledge Mark Boney for his work on the Dashamsha, Sanjay Roth lectures, and Freedom Cole have been most instrumental in putting together this lesson, and it's wonderful stuff. So one of the things that I kind of realized, I may actually put together an 8-week class on career maybe in the spring for my Saturday class, because this material, as I was putting this material together, I was just saying, God, we really could spend 8 weeks on this, because when we look at D10, we're not just looking at, we have to look at the 10th house. We have to look, and then we have to look at work, which is also the 6th house, and business partner 7th house, money 2nd house, work, money from work 11th house. So, all those things kind of come into play, and then people's talents and life purpose. And then there's all these kind of advanced things I was finding, which I can't cover in a 2-week, 4-hour section on this, but I may give you a taste of it. Maybe we'll expand this material, because you have to look at the 4th and 10th from the sun sign, from the sun chart is really important for career. You have to look at the 10th house from the moon chart. You have to look at there are special dashas for career. Narayana dasha, which I've never taught. Actually, and we should put it in Vargas too. There's a Narayana dasha works for each Vargas chart. So if you want to time career, you can do the Narayana dasha for Dashamsha. There's a Narayana dasha for Navamsha, and there's a Narayana chart for any of the Vargas, and it's very powerful. Again, probably we need 3 weeks to cover it, but when you really want to get into kind of fine-tuning DNA strands, you've got to kind of look at this stuff, and you have to look at Horangati Lagnas, which I covered in the Money Karma course too, and you probably have to resurrect that. And then I am going to bring in this week the A-10, which is the Aruda of career, and I'll explain that when we get to it. And you can do a lot with that. It's actually fairly easy to kind of play with. And then you always have to deal with the Clarkas in D10, Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter. And then we can always use Bhava Suchika and Rasi Tulia, which we learned in the Navamsha class, for the D10 also. I'm not sure, we're not going to get to practice that too much in this class, but you need to kind of think about it maybe for homework. So let me review where we're at, going back to kind of Hank Friedman's basic principles about dasha chart, how to use Varga chart. So first of all, we always have to start with the Rashi chart, because if it's not in the Rashi chart, it doesn't matter if the Varga chart is really good, it just won't fructify. There may be hopes for it, but it just won't fructify. So that's why I had you listen to my tape on the on the 10th house as a bonus tape if you had time to do that, because we really have to know the 10th house well, you know, whenever we analyze the D10. And so with all the Vargas, we're going to have to kind of do that. We're going to have to kind of go back to kind of the key houses that they're connected to. And so when we do Drekina, we'll have to, maybe I'll send you my lesson on D3 or my tape from Sedona if you're not going, because we always have to go back to understanding the house in the Rashi chart. So that's important. We can always use the Bhava Suchika principle, which is more for timing dashas, which is, remember what we learned from Bhava Suchika, which I called house transposition, where it goes, it's really sign transposition, if you remember, where the planet goes from the Rashi into, I showed you in the Navamsha, but we can do it in the D10. So let me pull up let's do Bhava Suchika in my, this is not going to work here. Okay, so again, just to review Bhava Suchika again, it's where it goes from the Rashi into the D10. So I'm in a Rahu period. So my Rahu, so we look at the in the D10, and in the Rashi chart, I've got Rahu. Is this my chart? This is my chart. This is not my chart. What is wrong with this? Okay. Anyway, so in my Rashi chart, I've got I'm in a Rahu period. So Rahu's in Sagittarius. It moves into Aquarius, and it moves a transposition of 3 in the Bhava Suchika technique. So basically, if you were looking to tell somebody, is your Rahu period going to be good for career, you would say, well, first of all, it moved into its own sign of Aquarius, which gives it dignity. It's conjunct Jupiter, which uplifts it. But it's, the houses are always more important. And the third house, trouble. It just does. It's not a growth house, as people like to say politely. It's as difficult in the Virgo. So and actually, I would say my career has compared to my Moon period and my Mars period, where my career just totally soared. And the Bhava Suchika here is not positive. And so that's something. Now we have to look at Mercury. So Mercury in my Bhava Suchika goes 2. So Mercury goes from Aquarius to Pisces, but it goes into a sign of debilitation or fallen energy, where it gets too scattered mentally. And Venus cancels the debilitation with its exaltation here. And it's a 2 transposition. So the Bhukti period of Rahu Mercury has been better, because at least it's a 2 transposition, and that has been the case. Things have been a lot better for me there. So I just want to remind you about Bhava Suchika. You can use it in your career. I'm not going to practice on all of your charts because we'll never get through all these famous people. But just for homework, you can practice it on your chart. And I have this wrong here, actually. It goes from Sagittarius to Aquarius. Okay, so the things that Hank Friedman is reminding us to look for is that yogas are very important in the Varga charts. And we haven't spent a lot of time on yogas. We could probably do a whole 2 lessons on yogas and Vargas. I mean, yogas are very important, and I don't teach them because they always get canceled, and there are all kinds of problems with them. But there are some basic yogas that you can remember. If a planet there's the Papakatari and Shubhakatari yogas, which are called scissors yogas. And basically, if you have malefics surrounding a planet on both sides, either in the same house or in adjacent houses, then that house is kind of spoiled, and that planet is spoiled. In the same way, if you have a Shubhakatari yoga, you have benefics hemming in a planet. It lifts it up. So those are easy to see, and they happen quite a bit. And then you've got your other basic yogas, when you have like and stuff like that. So I'll show you this in my chart again, just to remind you about yogas. So in my D-10 here, my moon period was very good for career, and even though the moon's debilitated in the first, my company took off in my moon period in a huge way with huge revenues when I was doing my financial stuff, which I still am, because I've got Venus and Mercury, 2 benefics hemming in the moon here in the D10. So the moon dasha was good for career just because of that Shubhakatari yoga. I don't have any Papakatari yogas, luckily, in the chart. So obviously, remember, watch for Gautam exalted debilitated in a chart. So my Venus period, my D10 is exalted. Now, I had a very kind of fortuitous Venus period for career. I became head of a university library during that time. I was promoted in a number of ways in my Venus period, even though I was kind of a graduate student. I kept getting all these incredible jobs where people gave me lots of responsibility, and my Venus is exalted in my D10 chart, and that's exalted is the best to see in a D10 chart, and then Vargotama is second best. Own sign is great. Obviously is a problem. Directional strength is something you want to remember to look at. Again, Sun and Mars in the 10th, Jupiter and Mercury in the 1st, Saturn in the 7th, Venus and Moon in the 4th. Those are all really good things. So you want to look for directional strength in the Varga charts, and that adds energy. You also want to look for exchange of houses as Parivartana yoga. That can give a lot of hidden energy to a planet, and I'll show you an example of this later with the famous people. So again, with the Vargas, you don't want to get into this Lord of the Ninth and the 10th very much. Some of the teachers do, but so I've got Mars and Mercury in my D9 chart. I've got Mars in Virgo and Mercury in Scorpio, so there's a Parivartana yoga between the 1st and the 3rd in my D9 chart, and it has caused me to be in business for myself and given me a lot of energy around writing, obviously. It also has lots of problems with relationship too, but exchanges of houses are very important in the Varga charts. So again, where does the Varga chart move? Does it move from the Rashi to the Varga? How many houses does it move? So you can see if there's a 10 relationship or a trinal relationship, that's always a good movement with Baba Suchika. Second and 10th are neutral. Third, sixth, eighth, and 12th are always difficult, except Mars in the 6th. And just having planets in the Kendras and the trines in the Varga charts is always good. Whereas they're difficult in the 3, 6, 8, and 12th houses. And again, exception is Mars in the 6th. In general, in all the Varga charts, planets in the 3rd or the 8th house in a Varga chart cause termination or break, whatever the division stands for. So we'll see in the D-10 chart, if you have planets in the 3rd, the 8th, or the 12th, it often may show loss of job, termination of job, changing jobs, closing of a company or something like that. So that's what you'll look for. So the 3rd, 8th, and 12th house in the D10. So again, reviewing again, it's best to have planets exalted Virgotama, own sign, exchanging signs, directional strength, combust, and planetary war planets defeated problems. Mornikar Castana planets, which there's an article in my book on that. I've many of you, Jupiter in the 3rd, Venus in the 6th, Saturn in the 1st, etc., etc. I have an article explaining these in detail because no one ever explains them to you. They tell you the rules, but Venus in the 6th causes addiction problems. You don't want it. Saturn in the 1st causes low self-esteem. You don't want it. Mars in the 7th causes controlling issues with relationship. Moon in the 8th bottles up the emotions. Sun in the 12th makes you not seen. Ketu in the 4th spoils happiness. Rahu in the 9th makes you fight against your gurus and priest figures and bosses. Jupiter in the 3rd gets you too involved in sexual fun energy when Jupiter should be kind of playing, should be dharmically involved in knowledge and wisdom and spiritual activity. So Mornikar, you don't want planets you don't want the Markastana planets in your Varga charts either. That's the opposite of Digvala, and so those two need to be taken together. Again, reviewing our basics about Vargas, look for sambandhas. Sambandhas are planetary relationships. I don't like that word, but planetary relationships can exchange in many ways. I mean, we know basic things like planet in house, planet in nakshatra, which doesn't apply to Varga charts, exchanging between two houses. So I said, that's a sambandha, and I have that in my chart, Mars and Mercury in between the D9. Conjunction in a Varga chart obviously is obvious. Mutual aspect, in this case would be kind of an opposition, which we said were important in Varga charts. Planet in a sign of another that is aspecting. So we have this coming up in transit now, which is going to create a strong relationship. Mars is in Aquarius now, which is owned by Saturn or Rahu. In this case, owned by Saturn, and Saturn is in Sagittarius aspecting Mars. So Saturn, when you have a planet aspecting his own sign, and you have another planet there, it creates a stronger relationship, and that's kind of what's called there's an official name for it, but it's kind of like a planetary aspect. I have this in my company chart too, and it's very powerful. I'll show it to you just so I think you understand it. Can't believe it's 2:55 already. Okay. This is my company chart. It was a Muhurta I did in 1992. It's not perfect. It's very good. But see, Jupiter, and here's another, this is an odd example. Jupiter is in Leo, and it's aspecting the Sun in the 9th house, and the Sun is in its sign of exaltation. So there's a very strong connection between the Sun and Jupiter in this chart by Sambandha, because Jupiter is in Leo and it's aspecting the Sun in its state of exaltation. So that's another kind of sambandha that you have to be aware of. It does show up a lot. The computer programs will help you find it. Simple dispositorship, major period Lord in the sign of Gemini and running Mercury subperiod would be another example of kind of a sambandha. So we also have to remember dispositorships. Okay, so let's look at a bunch of examples and major principles. I'm going to take some questions here. Actually, everything we did so far was kind of a review, but we kind of need to remember all those things as we start looking at the Vargas chart. So most of you, if you came late, I will unmute you. Actually, Cheryl, I unmuted you, so okay. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we covered? Okay, this is all kind of review, but we went over this 5 weeks ago, and we start using it a lot now, so we have to remember it. Okay, so planets in the logna of D. This is a very simple principle. Planets in the logna of D10 with dignity and good correlation to the D1 can show periods of career elevation. So the planet in the first house in D10 we said was very important. Anytime you put a planet in the first house of any Vargas chart, it's very important. And so let's look at Donald Trump's chart. I know he's not a popular person, and particularly, I'm not a particular fan, but he's our president. So let's pull up Donald Trump. He vanished. Here he is. Okay. Move this to the other side of the room here. Many of you have studied this. Okay. So Donald Trump has that sambandha again that we just saw. He's got Mars in Leo, owned by the Sun, aspecting the Sun with the 10th house aspect in his 10th house. So there's a strong coordination between Mars and Sun in his chart here. Very powerful. Sun has Digbala in the 10th. It's his Atmakarika, conjunct Rahu, suggesting very strong desire for fame and recognition and attention. Most politicians have that. It's just part of the character of political life. But notice how, and then let's look at his D10. He's got Rahu and Sun in the first house. Now, Sun is debilitated here in the first house. And again, when you have a debilitated Sun, particularly with Rahu, it may manifest as somebody wanting a lot of attention because inside they don't feel very good about himself. Probably if you read his biography, you kind of, people born with a lot of money or given a lot of money somehow don't feel very good about themselves because they haven't earned it and things like that, and they grow up kind of with that. So it's very interesting. He does have a debilitated Sun in his D10, but it's very prominent. But Rahu's Sun, very powerful. Now, if we go back, he did get elected president during Rahu Mars, which is quite fascinating. But Mars is very, look how strong Mars is in this chart. I mean, it's very powerful in this chart in the first house, aspecting the Sun here. So look at this in more detail. I've got notes on this. During his Rahu Sun period, again we had Rahu Sun in the first house in the D10. That's when he started his run with The Apprentice, and in Rahu Mars he became president, and now he's Jupiter. Now I actually missed, like most astrologers, the fact that he was going to become president during his Rahu Mars period, and that was because Mars is just so strong in that chart because it's in the first house and it's aspecting the 10th. And I think if we look in the Bhava Sujika, I think we'll find something hidden there, and I can't remember exactly, but it's very powerful in that chart. But you know, Rahu does bring fame to people. I mean, it just does that. So Rahu in the first in the D10 chart here is just going to bring fame and attention to his career. And Rahu does have some dignity in Libra, and it does well on these kind of material signs. So the principle to remember is look at planets in the first house in the D10 chart, and their doshas may elevate a person in status. So that's the principle. Now we'll see that it's also the case with Bill Clinton, and I lost his chart, but Bill Clinton also has Rahu in the first in the D10, like another politician, and became governor of Arkansas in his Rahu Mercury period. Again, elevation of status put the planet in the first house in the D10, and the Dasha period will elevate it. Tiger Woods, I do have this chart. Tiger Woods, very interesting chart. He's a Leo rising with Sag in the fifth house, with the Sun in the fifth house in Sag, surrounded by benefic. So I'm just going over this so I can remember it. He actually, had this big fall in his career during his moon period. His sun period elevated him. His moon period, which is debilitating on Danta, took him down. And he's going into his I think he's in the Mars period now, and I think his career is coming back up again now. So let's look at his chart. But he first gained prominence in his Sun-Saturn period, which you would think would not be a great period. He's got Sun and Saturn in the first house in the D10. And that's when his career really took off. And that's, again, this principle of the dasha of the planets in the first house in the D10. So let's look at his chart. Tiger Woods. Okay, fascinating chart. Okay, obviously fifth house is about first lord in the fifth. Fifth house is about recreation, sports. Okay, fire signs tend to be very connected to athletes. So very strong sun. You want sun in Sag. Very powerful connection here. And his Dashamsha chart. See, he's got Sun and Saturn in the first house here. In his Sun-Saturn period in 2007, May 2007, his career started really kind of taking off during that period. And he went very quickly, and then he crashed when he got to his moon period. Moon is the Akmakaraka, showing difficulties with finding happiness. It's in the Gandanta here. It's in the fourth house where he's got some digbala, but his career totally crashed in his moon period. Look at his moon, and the moon's in the 12th house here in the D10 chart. And now I believe he's finally coming. He's in Moon Venus now. His career's starting to come back a little bit. I think he's been in the news. We would think that in his Mars period, with Mars in the fifth here, in his D10 chart, that he's going to come back. We'd have to look at that again. But Mars is here in the 10th here, moving 5 houses. So if you use the Baba Sujika chart, principle, his Mars period should be good. Mars moves from Taurus to Virgo here, moving 5 houses. 5s are particularly good, we saw in Baba Sujika. So we would expect that Tiger Woods will make a comeback in his Mars period. It'd be interesting to look at his Navamsha chart. Got Moon in the 4th in Pisces here. It'd be interesting to study. He had that whole problem with affairs and his marriage and his whole loss of fame here. Quite a fascinating chart. Okay, let's look at one more. We're just looking at principles. Paul Newman, famous screen actor. Everybody knows Paul Newman. Good Hand Luke, favorite movie. He did not get his Paul Newman chart. Sag rising, Jupiter in the first. One of the best things you can have is Jupiter in the first for Sag rising. Digbala in its own sign. Just everybody loves you. Lots of luck. Cancels 1,000 problems in the chart. Jupiter in the first in Sag. Really powerful chart. And he's done a lot of great humanitarian work with, his food company, which is quite fascinating. So Paul Newman has Mercury Venus in his Dashamsha chart here in the first house. I'm sorry, that's the relationship chart. Sorry, he has Mercury and Gemini in the D10 chart here, and Mercury's in the first house here, also having Digbala in the three benefics in the first house here. I mean, it's gotta love them, right? Everybody loves somebody with three benefics in the first house. Major yoga here, but he won the Oscar for I think the color, not the color, that movie where he's the pool hustler in Mercury Jupiter. He didn't win an Oscar up until then, but it was in Mercury Jupiter with Mercury in the D10 chart here that he had this elevation of career, and even though Mercury and Jupiter are 12 houses from each other, Jupiter again is so strong in this chart in the first house that and Mercury. That there's just such elevation of career here, Mercury period. So the second principle, I'll see if I have time to go through your charts. Looking at your, I don't know if we're going to get to do your charts this week. I think we'll have to do them next week because there's just a lot of material, and maybe you can practice on your charts using the principle. So principle 2 is planets in the 10th house in D10 can bring great results in their dashas. So these are just simple things to remember. Look at the dasha. Look if the planet, if the person has planets in his first house in the D10, look at that corresponding dasha. Elevation of career may happen. That's what we just saw with 4 famous people. We're going to look at the second principle now, which is planets in the 10th house in the D10. Let's look at Audrey Hepburn, who got the Oscar in 1953 for Roman Holiday. I got her chart data. She's Aquarius rising. She had Sun, Jupiter, Rahu in the 3rd and Aries in D1. She got the Oscar during her Jupiter Rahu period, and then her career really took off when she went into her Saturn period. So let's look at that real quickly. Okay, Audrey Hepburn, Aquarius rising. Always a troubled chart to have Moon in the first for Aquarius rising because it's a real major. I don't know if she had addiction problems, but that's kind of or the 6th in the first. Interesting to read her biography. But we're looking at status. But here we have exalted Sun and Jupiter, which is the Amachakarka, which we'll talk about in a minute. And Rahu, again, Rahu brings fame, Sun Rahu fame, together in the 3rd house. The 3rd house, which is the way people usually talk about the 3rd house, is connected to the arts. You often find strong 3rd houses for major literary writers, for film actors and things like that. So 3rd house is connected to the arts for dancers and things like that. So during her Jupiter Rahu period, she got the Oscar, and she's got Jupiter and Rahu in the 10th house here. Even though Jupiter is fallen in Capricorn, there's a cancellation because Saturn is here. It's one of these weird rules, but again, just if we look at planets in the 10th house for a sudden rise in career, we see it with Jupiter Rahu period in Audrey Hepburn's chart. Okay, the principle number 3 for looking at D10 is planets exchanging houses in D10 and their dashas can provide a huge lift. Now I mentioned that Parivartana Yoga's exchange of houses is something, it's very important in regular astrology, is particularly important, in the Vargas, because it's one of the ways that things get connected in the Vargas. We can't connect them in the ways that we're used to, but we can look at yogas in the D10. So Clark Gable, of course, romantic comedian. Everybody knows him from Gone to the Wind. He actually got his fame in Mutiny on the Bounty, which I think came out 2 years before Gone to the Wind, 1936 or 1937. And he's satirizing with Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus in the first. Again, you always get these actors with these Jupiter-Venus combinations. Again, in Sag, Jupiter in the first. Again, everybody loves Jupiter in the first. One of these incredible things that you can have in a chart. There's a Parivartana Yoga in the D10 between Mercury and Taurus in the ninth and Venus in the first in Virgo. So let's look at that. Here's Clark Gable's chart. And here's the Saturn, Jupiter, Venus in the first house. Now let's look at his D10 chart. He's got Venus in Virgo, which is, again, the debilitation is not as important as the exchange of houses going on here. So he's got Mercury in Taurus and Venus in Virgo. So there's a connection between the 1 and the 9th. And if you read Ellen Anand's book on Parivartana Yoga, is obviously when the houses that get exchanged and the energies that they bring are more important than exaltation or dilatation signs. In this case, the Western astrologers tell us it's like Mercury goes into its sign of exaltation here because of the exchange of houses. But that's debatable in Vedic astrology because the houses are more important. But the point here is just the exchange of houses between the 1 and the first and the 9th house. During his Mercury-Venus dasha, he got his career just took off with Mutiny on the Bounty, and because in the D10 we have this exchange of houses between 1 and 9. So Sambandha can be very powerful here, and again, it's not something you see totally in the Rashi chart because Mercury. Well, the 10th house is owned by Mercury, so obviously career, 10th house is about career. But Mercury and Venus are 12 houses from each other. So it's not something you would see here, but the exchange of houses just kind of lifted him up here in that period. So Parivartana Yogas, look for them in the Varga charts. The principle 4, we're missing this end here. Planets conjunct in the D10 can be pivotal during their dasha. So again, that's another kind of association. It's one that you're going to find a lot of. And if there are first or 10 houses in the D10 are in angles or trines, that's also popular. So here we have Sophia Loren, another certainly if you're not old enough, you might not remember her, but Never on Sunday. Very famous actress. I can't even remember her most famous movie. But her fame took off in her Rahu Venus period. And let's look at her chart. Sophia, where are you? Okay, Sophia Loren. Okay, so here's Sophia Loren's. Again, Sag rising. Again, must be a popular sign for actors. Jupiter in the 11th. In Libra, very beautiful, magnanimous, Jupiter-Venus connection. In the D10 chart, Aries rising, and I'm gonna have to remember what I said here. Rahu Venus. I'm not showing that here. Geez, I wonder if I got the time wrong. I messed up here. Well, the principle is, I apologize here. I wonder if I've got the time wrong. D10, and it shouldn't change it because Rahu and Venus would have to be on kind of cutting edges to kind of move a little bit, and they're not. So and I apologize here. I'm my mistake here. But the principle is, and I do have some other examples of this, and I need to pull them out maybe for next week. If you have there is a 2 relationship here in the Varga chart between the 10th and the 11th houses. And so that actually may be what I was thinking about. But the other thing is if you had Rahu and Venus conjunct, which is the other principle that I was thinking. So this is actually um, um, Rahu and Venus are not conjunct, but they're two houses apart here in her D10. And when she went into her Jupiter period, her career totally took off. And look at her Jupiter. Jupiter's in the 11th house. You know, in her Rashi chart, and her Navamsha chart, and her D10 chart, Jupiter's Virgodama. Again, another powerful thing that we're always looking for in charts. It's in the 7th house. When in the Vargas charts, you want planets in the Kendras. You want them in the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses because they give a lot of power. And so the 7th house is giving a lot of power to her career, and her career took off in her Jupiter period. Okay. I added a bunch of slides. I added some other stuff. Let me quickly take some questions. Maybe I can quickly look at a few charts. I can't look at every chart because we won't get through any material. And I wanted to do famous people today. Does anybody have any questions? So I taught you 4 principles. There are more, but and this was for timing career in dashas. So I actually brought that in early. I kind of wanted to bring it in a little bit early because I just wanted to show you how it can work. So basically, reviewing the 4 principles, planets, the dashas of planets in the 1st house in a Varga chart, if there's dignity, can elevate career. Planets in the 10th house in the D10 house can elevate career. Those are easy to remember. Planets exchanging houses, as in the case of Kark Cable, can elevate career through kind of hidden things like the Paribhakra Yoga. And then planets conjunct in the D10 can be pivotal in a dasha period, particularly if they're in trines or angles. So that was the case here. Okay. So you're all overwhelmed here. Any quick questions? Okay. I added a bunch of new slides. Some of it is kind of informational, and I don't want to get too stuck on it. So people often want to know about promotions. You know, so when you're looking for promotions in a career, first of all, you're looking at planets which are the Lord, the 5th, 9th, or the 10th from the 10th house in the natal chart. So again, we always have to remember, and we forget this, we always have to rotate charts. And I'm gonna Afi, do you want to get on the line? I know what you were. I don't know what happened with your promotion, but let's see if we can find a promotion in your chart. Did you get your promotion or a new job, or we don't know?
I did not.
Okay. Okay.
I did.
So okay. So
But what I find interesting is that so if you look at Saturn Moon, or Moon Saturn, are in my 10th house in D10, I'm in the 12th house in the D10.
right.
I had a major career change during my Moon Saturn period.
Yeah.
And when I say major, I mean major. So that happened during my Moon Saturn. But I'm in Rahu period, and what kind of concerns me is Rahu moved 12 houses
Yeah.
from Rashi.
Yeah. Right,
So,
and it's also in the 8th house in you know in here. So your Rahu Mercury period with the principle of conjunction should bring a change of job. You know, so
so
if you stick it out between you know into Rahu, you know, if you stick out your same job, you would think it has to change in Rahu Mercury.
but then also Jupiter is in my 10th house, and it's
Right.
Vargotama
Right.
Jupiter, and I'm entering into Mercury Jupiter at some point next month.
So you're in Rahu Mercury. You're in Rahu Mercury Jupiter. I can't remember.
No, I'm in Rahu.
Right.
I'm going to be Rahu Jupiter starting December. I don't know, December something.
Yeah. The third level dashas can be very powerful. I mean, there's certainly a possibility for you to.
No, I mean I'm going to Rahu Jupiter in December, end of
Right.
December. Yeah.
Oh, Rahu Jupiter major. Right. So.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a three relationship, which could mean a change of job, and it also could be because of our Gautama. There's something could happen. So I guess if you keep looking, but let's look at promotions. I don't know if I mean, you don't want to be promoted at your current job, but you
Well,
haven't.
it would have been nice, but I wasn't promoted.
Yeah.
Jupiter is in the 10th house in the D-10. So would that be a possibility?
Well, I was just going to look at these new principles. I found them. I mean, Jyotish is endless. I had just found this today, and I'd never studied it before. Look at the planets which are the lord of the 5th, 9th, or 10th houses. Oh, my dogs. Okay, hold on a second. So look at this slide. I'm going to go shove at my dog so he's not recording. He gets a little frisky in winter days. Okay, so look at planets which are the lord of either the 5th, 9th, or the 10th from the 10th house in the natal chart. So this is where you have to do these rotated charts, and so let's look at that in your chart. So the 5th is Mars or Aries.
No, but you said from the 10th house, right?
Right. I'm sorry. Thank you. This is why you always have to remember.
So it would be Saturn, it would be Venus and Mercury.
Okay, Saturn, Venus, and Mercury. Okay. Thank you for helping me with that quickly.
Right.
So those planets, it's not something you would think about, but those planets may bring promotion in your chart when, and there's a bunch of things that can bring promotion too. I've got some new slides later in the chart. You also have to look at the A10, which your A10 is here in
Capricorn.
In Capricorn. So it certainly certainly Jupiter going over your A10 and your A11, which is in a couple of years, in conjunction with is certainly going to be elevating there, and then it's also going to be going over your Venus here. So it may be a couple years away, I think. But let's hope it's sooner, and I'm wrong.
Well, you weren't wrong about the house, so
Okay.
you were correct about the house.
Okay, I'm glad that happened. So anyway, there's a lot. I'm going to have you. I've got a bunch of new things, and you're going to have to look at it. But anyway, okay. So I'm trying to get back to kind of general principles. So, Afi, thank you. So, Antardashas of the lords of the 6th, 8th, and the 12th from the Dasha lord in the D10 indicate difficulties and tensions with the following modifications. So, again, one of the things that we always have to look at when we're looking at a Vargas chart usually is that, and maybe I'm going to bring up mine just because maybe I can find something quickly. Whenever you take the Dasha Lord and then you look at planets 6, 8, and 12 from it. So in my case, my Rahu-Saturn period, which was actually very rocky, it has in the D10 has a 6 relationship. Rahu-Mercury, he said, is good, has a 2 relationship. Rahu-Ketu is going to have a 7 relationship also, but Ketu's in the 12th here. So that does suggest kind of a big change in my career, possibly during Rahu-Ketu, and I could see that happening. I don't think it's going to be from the astrology. It could be from my Fortucast business. And then there's nothing 12 from Rahu, and then there's nothing there. Rahu Mars. Anyway, so you're always kind of looking at the Dasha Lord in the D10 and seeing what 6, 8, and 12 from it in terms of the Antidasha period. And that's a simple principle to look at if you're looking for problems. Again, 3s are also a problem, as I mentioned. But if there's some strength in the natal chart, then the difficulties can be overcome. So you always have to kind of go back and forth with those principles here. I'm not going to go over this week. There are transits for timing between D1 and D10, and we need to play more with this as a principle. This is something that I've just kind of really started understanding. I brought it up in the introductory tape on how, for example, if you're Scorpio rising, obviously Scorpio rising in your Rashi chart, you've got Jupiter in the first year, but if you're Scorpio rising in your D10 chart and you've got Jupiter transiting into Scorpio, then suddenly there's kind of a lift in your career just by that transit because of the interaction between the Rashi and the Vargas chart. So, but there are, you can read these principles. I'll send them in the newsletter. I don't want to go over this now because it can be a little bit too much. I'm going to let you read this. I forgot a lot of new material in here. So I want to get back to, the 10th house in general, because I don't know how many of you had a chance to kind of listen to my tape on the 10th house, but we have to before we look at the D10 chart, we have to kind of really understand the 10th house in the Rashi chart. And there are these kind of hidden things here. Now, for example, in some ways I'm blessed to have Lord the 10th and the 5th here, but actually it's not a good placement. Lord the 10th and the 5th and Lord the 10th and the 3rd, because of certain relationships. There's actually an 8 relationship here between Leo and Jupiter. I know Hartefeld pointed this out to me many years ago. My Sun period, I really kind of struggled to get my company going, so it was actually a very dicey period for me. And there was a lot of 8th house energy in here. It was very kind of difficult, and it's kind of a hidden thing. So you have to sometimes remember you want the 10th Lord in the Kendras. You generally want them in the trines, but actually the 5th and the 3rd house have kind of some hidden qualities to them. You want the Lord of the 10th and the 5th, or the 1st, or the 9th, but we said there's a problem sometimes with the 5th Lord, and I explained it here again. Similarly, the 3rd house, the 6th from the 10th. So there are all these kind of hidden relationships in Jyotish that you have to kind of think of, and you only think about them when you start doing more advanced studies. When you have the Lord of the 10th in the 3rd or the 6th, or even the 5th, sometimes people change careers, and that's in the Rashi chart, and it's kind of a thing it's kind of a thing that you wouldn't expect. And actually, if I look at my chart here, Lord of the 10th and the 5th here, in the Venus period, I was teaching comparative literature. My whole life was about the arts. I was very involved. Everything in my life was Venus. And then suddenly I went into the Sun period, and there was this kind of huge shift in my career. I mean, I went into finance from being a professor of literature. I mean, it was like a huge thing for me, and a career change that happened between Venus and the Sun here. So we have to look at the relationship between the 10th house and the D10 a little bit more. So there are 4 planets connected to the 10th house that are Carcas for the 10th house, and then these planets are also unusually important in the Varga chart. So we learned in the first tape that there's one key house for every Varga, and then there's usually one key planet for every Varga. In the case of the 10th house, there's 4 planets that are involved, and obviously the 10th house in the D10 is the most important house to look at, besides the first house. But the Karka planets you always have to look at in the Rashi chart and in the D10 chart. So Mercury is the business planet. I mean, he's the businessman, Vishnu, the maintainer. Good communication is needed to be successful at work. You want a strong Mercury for work. Saturn, Saturn is the karka for work. Hard work, responsibility, and discipline are necessary, even though they're not a lot of fun. You find people with Saturn in the 10th. Again, all planets actually do good in the 10th house, even malefics. And that's something that people forget. And even Saturn, even in Rahu and Ketu. Ketu is probably the most problematic planet in the 10th house because people aren't sure what they want to do. They often need computer careers or spiritual careers or something like that. But for the most part, even Saturn in the 10th house may make you work hard, but it gives you the qualities that you need to succeed. Sun in the 10th house is Digbala. Good leadership is needed. We don't want to be a tyrant, but so the Sun, you want the Sun unafflicted. You want all these planets unafflicted to support career. And Jupiter shows our abilities and blessings of knowledge and work and represents academic professions. So those are the 4 karkas for the 10th house, and they're also important to look at in the D10. Again, Mercury is connected to business, money, and banking and trade, hard work, Jupiter blessings, Sun fame. So all of those karkas need to be looked at. Now, one of my teachers feels that, and we saw this in the case even of Clark Gable's chart, where his career took off during Mercury-Venus with a 12-house relationship. Sometimes the Dashamsha can be very powerful and just lift the career. You might not see something in the Rashi chart. It's one of these exceptions, I think, with the Dashamsha chart because it's so important. The other things that we're going to have to practice with is that we always have to look at the Atma Karaka and the Amacha Karaka in the D10. Oh, there goes my dog again. The Amacha Karaka is the planet with the second highest, remember from our Janmani lesson, the planet with the second highest degrees. And so we always want to look at the Amacha Karaka in the D10 because that tells us something about work. And the Atma Karaka, is always about the soul. You have to look at it in every Varga chart. It's one of those things, when you're looking at the Varga charts, if Saturn's your Atma Karaka, you always look at where your Atma Karaka is placed in the Varga chart because it will show you what the soul needs to learn in that lesson. So if the Atma Karaka is in the 12th house in the D10, then that creates challenges around work for the soul. but if if it's in the seventh house, like Saturn, if it's in the seventh house, then there's basically it's got Digbala. It's going to be very powerful. So you don't want the Atmakarika in 3, 6, 8, or 12 in any Varga chart, because it means that you're going to have problems with that division in your life, because and that's a quick survey to do for people when you're doing them, but usually you don't have to do it because people call and ask you about their problems. The Machakarika, we'll see if we can get to that next week. I've got some information on that. The other thing we can look at is the trines in the D10. So the D10 is an Artha house, which is connected to wealth and status. So the Artha houses are 2, 6, and 10. So and they have a trinal relationship. So you can look. You always want to look at the trinal houses. You want to look at 2, 6, and 10. All of those houses together in the Rashi chart, and then also in the D10 chart. And we'll have to practice that, but I'm not going to do that now. So we're always kind of going back and forth looking at the relationship between D1 and D10. And these are some of the things that we always have to kind of remember to look for. So this is kind of a cookbook list. I should put together a better cookbook for you. Maybe I can do that next week if things don't get too crazy. So you want to look at the Lagna Lord in D10. Where does it go? So I'm going to practice with my chart just to kind of, I can do that quickly. So the Lagna Lord in my chart is actually K2. And in the D10, it actually goes into the 12th. Something I just noticed. That's pretty ugly. Probably means I want to let go of work and go to the ashram, which is, will probably happen in my Rahu Ketu period. But that's so you want to look at the chart. If we could look at Mars, we also, which is the secondary word of my chart, Mars in the D10 goes into the second house, which is a better thing. It's not it's a 7 transposition. But anyway, so that's the first thing we look at. So you want the D1's Lagna Lord in good houses in the D10. In my chart, we don't have it. It's in the 12th. At least we have Mars in the second here, so kind of middling. You want in the D1, the 10th Lord or planets in the 10th house of D1 are placed in the D10. This stuff always gets a little abstract, so we have to kind of practice with it. Okay, so basically, you want to look at the Lord of the 10th in my chart, which is the Sun. Where does it go in the D10? It actually goes into the 3rd in Scorpio here. Again, another kind of difficult placement. So Lord of the 10th is in the 3rd house. We would rather have it we would like to have it in the 10th house. We would certainly rather have it in a Kendra than in the 3rd house. But it may suggest being in business for myself, and kind of, which is what's been the case. We also have to look at planets in the 10th house. Now, I don't have any planets in the 10th house, but let's say I had Jupiter in the 10th house. Then we would look at Jupiter in the D10 and see where it is. And because in this case, I have Jupiter in the 6th house. It's a theoretical example, but I just wanted to kind of make that abstract point more clear. So you want the this is this whole back and forth dance that you do between D1 and D10. Now, these principles you do with all the Varga charts, and so I have to kind of cookbook for it, but basically these principles apply to all the Varga charts. So you look at the D10's Lagna Lord in the D1. So, and actually I have a good placement here. So my D10 Lagna Lord is Virgo, which is Mercury. And so we go back to the Rashi chart, and it's in a Kendra in the fourth house in Aquarius. Now, it actually has a lot of problems here also. We actually don't, we use the principle of Marika Karakastana. Mercury doesn't do well in the fourth house. So it's the opposite of Digbala. So there is a problem here with Marika Karakastana with my Lord of the 10th, Lord of the D1 chart, which is Mercury, going back to the Rashi chart. I'm going to have you practice this for homework next week, because unless you do it, go through all these things on your own chart, and then you're probably not going to get it, and it just takes. There's a lot of abstract principles here. So do you want the D10's 10th Lord well placed in the D1? Again, the Varga, the 10th house is the most important chart. So the 10th Lord in my D10 again is Gemini or Mercury, and Mercury is in the fourth house. Again, it's in a Kendra. We like the fact it's in a Kendra. It doesn't have very much dignity in Aquarius. It's not the worst place in the world for it. It's kind of neutral. But it does have the Marna Karakastana quality again. So you want to look at the D10's 9th Lord or 11th Lord or 2nd Lord and how they're placed in the D1 chart. And again, this is a lot to remember. You have to you get a lot of mixed results, and sometimes I'm going to have to, no one actually does this, but I'm going to have to kind of create a cookbook or a checklist for you to kind of go through all the things. And you look for patterns, and actually the more patterns I'm seeing doing this in my own chart, the more I'm kind of getting depressed. But not really. I have a lot of status. I do have challenges at work though. So we're going to look at the D10's 9th, 11th, and 2nd Lords and see where they go into the D1 chart. So just to do that, so the 9th Lord in my 9th chart is Venus. Venus is in the 3rd house here. Again, not a great house placement. The Lord of the 11th income is the Moon in my D10 house. It's in the 1st house in my Rashi chart. Could be actually, it's a decent placement. Anyways, Moon in the 1st house is one of these, even though it's debilitated here. And the Lord of the 2nd house, which is Jupiter, the Lord of the 2nd house, which is Venus again here. 3rd house. So I would say, going through this checklist for myself, I would say my D1, D10 interaction is pretty terrible. And in some ways, maybe it's a look at some of the things that go on within my workplace. And the Rashi Tulia is you're gonna have to review that. It's kind of taking the lagna of the D10 Virgo, which is Virgo, and moving it to the Rashi chart, and then reading the chart that way, and that can also reveal you things. And whenever I do this, my Rasi Navamsha Tulia is not great either. So and some of it is very real. So it just somehow reminds me that seeing my own blind spots here. Rayanne had a question. I'm sorry I missed it. Rayanne, why don't you unmute yourself? I'm sorry, I just saw your question.
No, that's okay. I hope that my question isn't too basic.
No.
In my birth chart, my Rasi, in the 10th house is Mars, and that's directional strength, and I'm a Cancer ascendant. And
right.
Then in D10, the Sun is now
in the 10th.
In the 10th house. But that's not an exchange, right?
Right.
I mean, it's significant, but it's not an exchange.
Yeah, I mean, we do like having, Donald Trump has, Sun in the 10th house. So maybe that's why you like him so much. But
Yeah, really.
and Taurus too. You're both Taurus, Sun and Taurus.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, yeah, no, yeah, there's not a Sambandha there.
Okay,
But,
so I have a lot of nice things in the D10, but then if you look at the 12th house in the D10, the Rahu and the Jupiter are almost completely conjunct. They're less than a degree apart.
right.
And
So,
I'm in Rahu and it's been a disaster.
right.
I've lost businesses, like multiple businesses. I lost my home. I found another place to teach. It is now closing in December.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
oh, it's been a real challenge. So don't lie to me or anything, but I'm moving into Jupiter in 2 years, but Rahu and Jupiter are conjunct in the 12th. So am I just looking at more of the same for the next 16 years?
Well, okay. Well, maybe go move to a foreign country. 12th house. But Jupiter is exalted there, so the dignity should help. You probably would want to look at again the transposition. So Jupiter actually goes. So this is Bhava Sujika. Now this I can't emphasize how important this is. And we talked about it in week 2 for about an hour. So Jupiter, and the first time I learned it, I didn't pay attention to it, but every time I study it now, it's, oh my God, it's all there. So look at Jupiter in the Rashi chart is in Virgo. It goes 11 houses into exaltation in the D10.
I thought that was pretty good, but Rahu is still there.
Rahu's still there. I mean, you can do the mantras. There's a yoga there that the I can't remember the name of the Jupiter Rahu yoga, and it's very connected to respect for teachers and gurus and um, priests and bosses and things like that. But if you still have rough lessons to learn around that, you might need to do the mantras and the pujas for that.
For Jupiter or for Rahu or for both?
Well, it's a combination. See, Jupiter gets spoiled.
Right.
Jupiter is really the one that gets kind of spoiled here. I mean, Rahu's kind of a spoiler always. I mean, it can bring fame and attention. You would have to do it for there's a special there's special mantras and pujas for that yoga, and
Okay.
and it covers both Jupiter and Rahu. And you before you go into your Jupiter period, and there's this thing called Dasha Sandhi. Usually like 7 days before and after a major dasha change, especially like a big one from Rahu to Jupiter. You can have a priest do pujas for you. I mean, if you can't afford 7 days, you can do 3 days before and 3 days afterwards. You got to get your dasha perfectly rectified, which we can do. But 3 days, 7 days, 21 days, or it's called a Rashi Sandhi dasha, and you do it when you're changing periods, and it because it's like going to another planet, and you want to make a smooth transition. All the last karma that we haven't finished in our Rahu period will come up in Rahu Mars to complete. So whatever lessons you haven't learned that you need to learn, your need comes up, and so there's a lot of big transition in Rahu Mars. And then Jupiter is just a whole. Luckily, it's Jupiter, and it's the ninth lord for your Cancer Lagna. So you want to welcome him. So you would do it. You would do that. You would do the get the priest to do the ceremony.
I
And if
noticed,
you need,
I
yeah,
noticed that in Donald Trump's chart, I mean, he did win in Rahu Mars, but then
right.
immediately after he switched into Jupiter, and like the day after he switched into Jupiter, the judge in the Trump University case said, no, we're not waiting while you're president, pay up the 25 million. So it was, I Camilla Sutton talks about how what you ignore in Rahu will come due in Jupiter immediately.
Yes, it's an important principle. I mean, Rahu, you and I both are still learning the lessons of Rahu. I mean, you just have to be impeccable about ethics and doing everything dharmically and not cutting any corners when you're in Rahu. I mean, you just, and Rahu thinks you and thinks that kind of can talk you into not even realizing that, because it just kind of takes over.
Right.
So you have to just kind of, and sometimes it is just a lot of deep past karma. I mean, it is your Amakorka too. So it's been a kind of a, it's been like a major, teacher for your life this whole period. And I'm glad it's almost over. At the same time, it's not too early to do remedies to kind of help it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions. Okay, let's move on. I've got a lot of material. Like I said, we could do 4 weeks in Dashamsha. Okay, so I just went through, this is kind of your cookbook of the way D1 and D10 interacts. And for homework, you should play with this and then see if you come up with a pattern. Basically, when we looked at my chart and my pattern, we actually had a pretty horrible connection between D1 and D10. And it's actually amazing I did so well. And, actually, Saturn's my Atmakarika in my life. Saturn governs work. And so my biggest karma in this lesson has been work and employees and things like that. But when I'm looking at my D1, D10 transposition, I'm saying, oh my God, there's a lot of difficult stuff here. So things that indicate a good career. So the strong 10th house in the D10, you're looking for that status recognition and great achievement. Planets in the Lagna or Lagna Lord in D10. Again, could be anything. I mean, just you want planets in the you want the Lagna Lord of the Rashi chart in D10 that's going to elevate you in status. You want any planet in the first house in D10, and that's good. You want planets in the D10 chart. You want planets in Kendras and Trichonas, and you want the Dasha Lord or Antardasha Lord getting connected to the D10 Lagna. That's kind of a very advanced point, but I underlined it so you kind of remember it. There are all these kind of advanced rules about dashas, and it's impossible to remember them all. But if the dasha lord or the antidasha lord that you're in gets connected to the D10 lagna, then it can elevate career. Again, that's why the first house in the D10 is so important. Okay, so this so in the D10, the 3 most important houses to look at, of course, are the 10th, but the 6th and the 7th are also important. The 7th is often business partnership, and the 6th house is connected to service work. Again, remember, 6th house in the Rashi chart is everyday work. 7th house is business partnership, and 10th house is status. So you often have to look at all 3 of those in the D10 also because they're very important. So the first house in the D10 is how the native shows up in the workplace, his reputation. Or the first in the D10 and its placement will show the attitude toward work. Ambitious in the 10th, but frustrated in the 12th. So obviously you want the Lord of the first in the D10 and the 10th because it gets digbala. You don't want it in the 12th because it's frustrated. So that we said when we're looking at dashas, I'm going to see if I can bring some of your charts in here so we don't lose you. So let's go to Brooke here and look at that principle. I'm only going to be able to do like one principle with one person just so I can get through all of you. So Brooke, your 10th house, and the first time I looked at it, you've got Venus in the first. It's wonderful to have Venus in the first house. We're trying to illustrate where the Lord of the first is in the D10. So in your case, you've got Lord of the first and the fifth in Pisces here for K2, and even if it were Mars, it's in the 10th. So this is a very powerful placement. Venus K2 in the fifth, good, is very good for spiritual knowledge, and it's a very powerful placement of the first house Lord. You've got a benefic in the first house, and you've got a retrograde Mars here in the 10th, which is the secondary ruler of Scorpio. Do you want to comment on has your career? I mean, you're in a Rahu period, and Rahu's with Saturn. Um, um, uh, has your career been supported by that general principle?
I noticed in the D10 I have Jupiter in the 6th and Mercury in the 8th. My career started out after I graduated from college. I was hired very shortly as a professional dancer. I was a dance major in college.
Wow.
And it was the best job I ever had, was that job that I got immediately. And it was the very end of my Venus period, near the end of my Venus Mercury. And I had a career as a professional dancer and performer in New York City for 4 years after that. But then I transitioned. I changed careers, and I became I started working in a hotel, and then I moved to the West Coast, and I started working with IT. And during my Rahu period, it started out basically pretty tame, and then in midway, it just sort of went crazy. After my mother died, my job situation just changed. I lost my job. It was the 2008, the recession, and I was just going from one short-term job to the next and not working out. It's just like horrendous, very up and down. And so for about the last 3 years, I've been in one contract job. It's a government job, and it's a better situation, but I'm once again, it's ending, so I'm shifting into a temp situation. So it's not great at all.
Right.
I noticed that Rahu is in the 11th house from the
right.
In the Navamsa chart, it's the 11th from the Atmakaraka. So I have had some gains, financial gains during this time, mostly just making a stable salary. But it's not like some great career picture at all.
Right. I get it. So it's interesting. I mean, I think, thank you for sharing all those details. I mean, obviously, look at Venus in the first, which I wouldn't have guessed you having a dance career, but I mean, it's kind of a little bit there with Venus in the first.
But my third house is very strong with an exalted Mercury and the Sun in the third, and
right.
So I've always had a very strong abilities and talents with dancing and singing and so forth.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So Rahu does have some dignity here in Virgo, obviously, but the Saturn conjunction, creates, a lot of intensity. And obviously during Rahu Saturn in 2008, when again we had the principle of the conjunction, you said you had a lot of turmoil in career, even though it was in the 11th house. The 11th house is 6 from the 6th. So, it is the 11th house is kind of is a big corollary of the 6th house, and the 6th house is everyday work. And even though the 11th house, we think of it as the house of gains, it's actually a pretty problematic house. If you take my class on the secret of the houses, you'll see that the 11th house, is not as friendly as we want to think it is. It can bring a lot of struggle. It eventually can bring some resolution. Okay, thank you for sharing, Brooke. That was great. You can mute yourself. Okay, the second house in the D10 is connected to starting a new business, money for business, and wealth and finances. So it is a money house. I'm not sure I'm going to illustrate that with anybody's chart here. The third house is vacation, short leaves of absence, and courage to be an entrepreneur and go out on your own. So when you run a third house period, it can mean the end of a job. It can mean a leave of absence. I think there are a couple of people in the chart. Ray Ann, do you have another question? I don't know if I put your hand in. Is anybody on a leave of absence here? So we have any third house situation. I don't know if anybody in the class. Victoria, I know is. Victoria, do you want to get on? Let's look at your chart a little bit. Oh, Victoria can't get on because she's on her cell phone. So we're going to have to kind of make do. So Victoria's D10 chart has Rahu and Aquarius with dignity here. And she's in a Mercury period. She's been out of work for a little bit. She's in Mercury Mars. She's in Mercury Moon at the moment, which can create, by nature, Mercury Moon is going to create a little bit of confusion because those planets just create confusion. There is a 10 relationship here. Mercury Mars has a 2 relationship with an exalted planet that are enemies, and Mercury Rahu is going to go to the lower of the Dashamsha chart. It would seem, Victoria, and we'd have to look at a lot of other things too. Rahu is Virgodama here too. It would seem that your Mercury Rahu period could re-elevate you back to career if you want to go back to work. There is a 3 relationship here. We were just looking for examples of 3s in the chart, and your Sun period is where you kind of take a leave of absence from work. And I don't know when you had to take a leave of absence from work, but with Sun exalted in the 3rd here, it could have happened during Mercury's Sun. I was hoping to ask you about that because I know you would take a leave of absence. So probably you can't go into the chat box anyway. So I don't know here. I'm guessing, but I just wanted to show you how you might look at this. And again, all this stuff gets very complicated. The 4th house in the D10 chart is our office. It's the condition of the workplace. So it's the home of work. It's the office. It also can be considered happiness from work. I've heard it said that. I don't know. I've had this huge problem with offices in the last, since I went into my Rahu period. I mean, just horrendous. I should look at my chart here. Well, so if we looked, even if we looked at 4th, that's Victoria's chart. That's my chart. So my 4th house is owned by Jupiter, and I've got Jupiter and Rahu together in the 6th. I've had this weird karma. I had this really nice office in Sedona when I moved in 2012, just during my Rahu period, and then I went into Rahu Jupiter. I had this problem with mold in my office, and dust and dirt, and nobody would clean the office, and I couldn't quite get out of there because I had this complicated situation. But Lord of the Jupiter here, which is owning the 4th house, is afflicted by Rahu in the 6th here. So it's not really great. And we don't. So basic. Just was trying to look at it and illustrate that principle. 5th house, new job longevity, change of work, subordinate skills, knowledge. So the funny thing about the 5th house, because it's 8th from the 10th, which it's I'm sorry, there's an 8 relationship with the 5th house and the 10th house, and so it can bring change of job. So that's something you have to look at. It also be connected to subordinates, people who work under you, and skills and knowledge. 6th house is service work. You generally want to see if the 6th house is stronger than the 7th house in the D10, then you tend to work for people. And if the 7th house is stronger in the 6th house, then you may have business partners or be self-employed. So that's actually kind of a key. Sometimes people ask you, can I be in business for myself? And you have to compare the 6th and the 7th house lords in the D-10. You could do that in somebody's chart. I don't know who works for themselves. Let's look at Kathy's chart. I don't know if she can get on. Kathy, can you get on? Okay, Kathy actually works for the government of Canada, but let's see if her 6th house is stronger than her 7th house. So in this case, she's got Ketu in the 6th in Capricorn, and she's got Sun Saturn in the 7th. So again, Sun in the 7th is not a very good placement, as you know, because it's kind of in 7 houses away from. It's like sunset, 7th house Sun is like sunset, especially for a Leo in this chart. She's Leo rising too. So and Saturn is afflicting the Sun. So there's kind of difficulty. There'd be difficulty with business partners in her D10, and Ketu, which is always kind of reclusive. She's got Ketu in the 6th house here, which is the house of service, and Ketu. It's very interesting. I'll just share this because Kathy is works alone in lookout towers in the Canadian forest as a forest ranger to make sure there are no fires. And so you can see it's kind of funny. You can see that K2 in the 6th here. It's kind of serve as how that's kind of manifesting here, and how she couldn't do very well in being business for herself or having business partnerships. Kathy, I don't know if you can get on. I think I know you well enough that we were able to answer that. Okay,
Gary, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Do you want to add anything to what I said?
No, that's kind of interesting. Does Saturn have Digbala in that position there?
Saturn does have Digbala there, and it's in its own sign. But
does that sort of isolation, working alone, go with that too? Maybe.
Yeah. Now, also the Lord of Rahu is actually the Lord of your 7th here, because if Saturn's in Aquarius, then Rahu becomes the primary Lord. So Rahu is the primary Lord, and Rahu's in the 12th here. So to me, it seems like this chart is very difficult for working for yourself or business partnerships, and the 6th house is certainly stronger for K2 being of service. Here, I thought that was interesting. Thank you, Kathy.
Just a couple things. I think I started this job when my Mahadasa started, and one of the descriptions of Rahu I've read is that he's associated with smoke.
Very interesting.
So anyway, yeah. But thank you.
Yeah, Rahu in the 12th is also going to be kind of reclusive. I mean, it's kind of an agitating place to be. It's interesting. I mean, your sun period, which was when you were very young. I mean, you were just really young in your sun period. I don't even think you could have been in business partnersps.
Sure.
19, you were 19 when your sun period ended. So.
Yeah, that's when I started getting into sort of spiritual studies and things. So I guess in a way that sort of headed me into reclusive activities, meditation, and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
You can mute yourself.
Okay.
Let's see. The 8th house in the D10 chart is a place of end of career. So like eight's connected to longevity. So planets in the 8th house in their dasha period can end a career, or can lead to retirement, or connected to a company, it may be the incurrence of debt. The 9th house in the D-10 is connected to boss or mentors in business, and when people complain about their bosses, one of the things I always remember is to go to the 9th house in the D10, and I'm actually shocked how accurate it always is. Let's look at anybody have a difficult boss they want to look at in their
I
D9?
do. I do. I have
Okay.
Sun in 9th house in D10.
Okay. Let's go here. Okay, you've got Sun in the 9th. So now there's a principle that we haven't gone over, which is the Sun is one of the Karakas for the 9th house. So you don't want the Karaka in its own house. It's called Karaka Bhavanacha. It actually creates too much energy. And Sun is in Taurus, which is the enemy sign. Are there any other bad aspects to it? This wouldn't have jumped out at me if you hadn't mentioned it. Um, um,
Well, it's the Lord of the 12th in the 9th house.
yeah, you can't play too much with that in the Varga charts.
Oh, okay.
Some of the people tend to do that, and you can do it with the Lord of the First. You have to do it with the Lord of the First, but you shouldn't do it. You play with a little bit. It usually isn't too accurate. You do have a Saturn aspect by Graha Drishti, which we also don't use.
What about transits, Barry? Do we use transits in the different Varga charts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we have to have a half a lesson on that sometime. I just tabled it for this week. I did bring it up in the intro class. You do have a Mars Rashi Drishti aspect from Capricorn to Taurus. Here, you can use Rashi Drishti in the Varga charts, but not the Graha Drishti. So we do have the exalted Mars aspect here. So that is a malefic aspect on. So there's a lot of fire. So do you have kind of angry, dominating bosses? Is that what you
Yeah,
get?
very egotistic, very Donald Trumpish, if you will.
Okay.
Never admitting when they're wrong. It's all about them, very selfish, always trying to put everyone else down, those types of people. I've been very
Okay.
blessed with that.
Okay. So do you see that pattern now with
Yeah.
Mars, the exalted Mars aspecting the Sun, and the Sun, which is Karka Bhavanacha, in an enemy sign of Taurus. So yeah. So
I was going to ask you something, Barry. If you see, I have exalted Venus in the 7th house. My 7th house looks much better than my 6th house, but I've never worked for myself.
okay, we'd have to go to the natal chart too. So you've got Jupiter in the 7th here. I mean, I think if you go back to the money karma course, I can't there's so much things I just remember. There's a bunch of things to kind of help us decide if you can work for yourself.
Yeah.
And I can't remember off the top of my head because I'm starting to get less encyclopedic.
Okay.
But if you have the money karma course, it's in
Yes.
There's a slide in there on how you can work for yourself, and I usually look at the 3rd house,
Okay.
Because to me that requires a lot of courage. But when I did all the research on it, there were like 5 or 6 things that you needed to look at. The third house is very important in the Rashi chart for that. I suspect Saturn in the third house, even though they say Saturn in the third house is good, still creates kind of fear about being in business for yourself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Saturn being in the third house is more like service for others. Yeah.
No, Saturn in the third house, I mean, third house is the courage to kind of venture forward into and conquer new territory. You know, the Kark is Mars. And it gives you kind of that adventure. Saturn in the third house kind of, even though it has dignity here, but Saturn by nature is just more reserved, you know.
Okay.
And it's connected to Rahu in the nakshatra. Anyway, yeah, I'm not seeing a strong. Yeah, I mean, the principle that we were looking for is, yeah, you should say Saturn is the 7th lord. Yeah, your 7th house is stronger than your 6th house. I'm sorry, in the D-10. Your 7th house is stronger than your 6th house here. So this principle is not working in your chart. I don't know what that means, but we'll have, again, you have to go back to the Rashi. Okay, thank you. Good question. I'm not omniscient. But I'm stumped here. Okay, the 10th house is the most important house to look at in the D10. Any planet here gets power, career, success, and status. So let's look at Diana's chart. Diana, do you want to get on? I think you're unmuted. Yeah. Okay, so Sag rising for the D10 with Jupiter and Saturn in the 12th. So that's tricky. You are in a Jupiter period, so frustration at work. Jupiter Saturn was particularly bad year for work with the Jupiter Saturn period between 2010 and 2013.
Yes, it was. It was when I was working in another school district. It was my first years, and the kids were very difficult.
Yeah. Okay, and then so now you're in Jupiter
Jupiter,
Venus.
Venus.
And there's an 11 relationship here, so we like that. Jupiter's still in the 12th, so there's always going to be frustration about work here. We want to look at the 10th house. You've got Moon and Venus here, so you've got 2 benefics in the 10th house here in general, which, you know, is good.
Are they in Virgo? Are they happy in Virgo? I guess Virgo
Well,
is about health and service too.
Yeah, they're not happy in Virgo, right? So it is
Okay.
about they aren't happy in Virgo, but I suppose you'd rather have a benefic in the 10th house. In the principles that I'm trying to teach, you want benefics in the 10th house. So
Okay.
I think it keeps you employed, but not necessarily happily. You know, and that's probably the case. And you've got K2 in the first house in the D10. So you know, K2 is always going to feel like not noticed, unappreciated, unhappy, you know, reclusive, withdrawn, wanting something more. I mean, is that the case?
Yeah, I guess I'm always by myself. Yeah, that might be. It's in Sagittarius. Is Ketu happy in Sagittarius? I thought it
Yeah,
had some dignity.
yeah. K2 has dignity here, so it's exalted. So I mean, somehow a spiritual career, you know, will come to you sometime. I don't. It hasn't come in Jupiter K2. Wonder if it'll come in Saturn K2, which is 2030. But you would think that when you've got all your, you know, in transit, going back to our principal transit, you've got all the planets going through here. Now Saturn's going through your Sagittarius. Jupiter's going to go through here next year. K2 is going to be throwing in here. So there should be a huge kind of
Change?
energy. Well, we'd have to the transits are telling us there's a lot of energy coming here. You
Mm.
know, and you get a lot of energy coming here. It could bring change because it creates restlessness. Um, Jupiter could bring elevation. Don't forget. So when Jupiter goes in there in November 2019, when Jupiter transits into your first house in the D10 because you're always going back and forth between the Rashi and the Rashi transits and the Varga. You're gonna have some status happening here. You have a lot of complicated, but see with Saturn with Saturn here now you've got all these complications because you got Mars and Rahu and Ketu on that.
Mm.
It's a stressful, works stressful now with Saturn there. K2 going in there next year is going to be stressful. It's not until Jupiter gets in there. That's by transit. But I just wanted to use that principle because it's coming up in your chart.
And I guess Jupiter and K2 are happy together, correct?
Yes, that's the one combination that you like. So I think I think the Jupiter transit will be good. Now we have to look at it in terms of the dasha. You go to Jupiter. Um, you're actually going to be in Jupiter Moon actually for the most part during the Jupiter transit in Sagittarius, and Jupiter and Moon have an 11. So I think there's a good chance for career elevation and more happiness
Mm.
when Jupiter goes in there. But I think there's going to be a lot of turmoil before that.
I have a question, Barry. I have in my third house in the Rashi chart is Pisces. Does that mean does that represent courage to be self-employed or no? I guess because Pisces is more spiritual, correct, than driven.
Yeah, we'd have to look at Jupiter is 8 houses from the third house,
I
so
see.
that's not a good placement.
Okay.
So yeah, so I and again, if we're looking at the 6-7 thing, um, your sixth house is stronger. Well, your sixth house is kind of weak with Venus. It's in the with Venus fallen here. Venus is good in Gemini. Um, Mars. Your seventh house is really complicated for business relationships. I mean, it would be a
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah, I
I
see that
mean,
Rahu has dignity but no Mars, correct?
right, Rahu Mars is always a mess. I mean,
Mm.
it's just all over the place, and on the first seventh axis, I mean, business partnerships would be very challenging for you. I mean,
Mm.
I can see you'll be dissatisfied, but in some ways, you'll be happier working for other people.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, um, do one couple more principles edit. Where am I? The 11th house is the house of gains made in career, so money from work. So even in 10th, when you're looking at money income, you always look at the 11th house. It's money from work in the Rashi chart, and also in the Vargas chart. And then the 12th house causes leave of absence, time off due to disability, liabilities, and expenses, change of career. So let's look at somebody else's chart. Cheryl didn't want to ignore you today. Oh, geez. Cheryl, I think you're online, or can you speak? I'm sorry if I haven't gotten to everybody today. I've tried to kind of make the rounds here, but it's always tricky. So here's Cheryl's chart, Scorpio rising. I don't your mic's been on, but I guess you're on your cell phone, so maybe you're not able to listen to speak. I think that happened last week. So your D10, you've got Capricorn rising with Rahu's sun here. You're in a Rahu period. So based on the principles that we learned, elevation of career is possible because Rahu is in the first house in the D10. And it would particularly come in Rahu's sun, which is not until 2028, particularly because and the sun then in the D10 chart. And you can't wait until 2028 to get your career going, but um, um, who's Saturn with Saturn in Aries, something we don't like. Now we do. It does move 4 houses from in Baba Suchika. It moves 4 houses from. I'm sorry, it doesn't move 4 houses. It moves. It moves 4 houses from Capricorn to Aries. So again, in a Rahu Saturn period, you have to make sure not to run around like a rabbit and not be over anxious. By nature, Saturn in Aries is particularly going to make sure that you don't run around like a rabbit so you don't make mistakes. But the 4 transposition should mean that there can be gains in the period. I think if you slow down, I think we've talked about this. So again, I'm going back to the Baba Suchika here. Now, in terms of other principles, change of career for you would be when Venus comes up. And so Rahu Venus 2025, you've got a 12 relationship, you've got Venus in the 12th here, could create a change of career from whatever you're currently doing. Good. So I just want to. So I'm gonna. My voice is going. I'm actually surprised how intense this lesson was. I have added about 30 slides to this lesson since I sent it to you, and I will send you the new version, and you can read over it for next week. Part of me thinks that we should spend 3 weeks on Dashamsha, but we don't really. I don't think we have that luxury. It's very, very important. But read through the slides, and I'll give you some homework to apply it to your charts. Because with all these things, you have to do it. One of the maybe I can get to these slides about termination from work. This is kind of fascinating. I think we have a few minutes to do this. So termination of work is connected to the 3rd and the 8th houses in the D-10. Again, the 3rd house is the 8th from the 8th. And the 12th house also will call great termination from work. So I've got some interesting examples here. Grace Kelly, who married the Prince of Monaco and became the Princess of Monaco, and had this great career, and she got the Oscar in 1954 for The Country Girl, and then suddenly she kind of left her career and got married, and that was a termination of career. Okay, here's Grace's chart. Libra rising, Venus in the 1st, very powerful for a film star, with the Sun again, powerful for a film star. Mercury is there, also very powerful. K2 is probably causing problems here, but look at her D10. She's got Mercury is fallen here in the 3rd house, so she did manage to her career kind of peaked right when she got her Oscar. I mean, her career was actually going on before Mercury in her K2 period, actually, but with Mercury in the 3rd here, and she suddenly, even after she got the Oscar, she got married, she left her career. Again, Mercury in the 3rd here in the D10 for the Mercury period. I've got a couple more examples here. John F. Kennedy, career obviously ended with his assassination. Let's see, we haven't been the same since we lost John F. Kennedy. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember that. Most of you are, but I mean, we all cried. So John F. Kennedy has an interesting chart. It's Virgo rising. Mercury is stationary. It's something I wrote about it in my article this weekend. Stationary planets are very powerful. Donald Trump has a stationary Jupiter. He's in a Jupiter period. I have a stationary Jupiter also in my 8th house for astrology. But stationary planets are very powerful. and they can really elevate. James Raha thinks that the strongest thing that you can have in any chart is a stationary planet. And you have to look for it, and you have to kind of look for a special table that shows you whether you have a stationary planet. But here's John F. Kennedy's chart. His Deshamsha chart, Aquarius rising. He died during Jupiter Saturn, I believe. Now, Jupiter is a Marika, 7th house lord for Virgos is Jupiter is a Marika for Mercury. So Jupiter was a Marika period for him. His career actually got elevated and started in his Rahu period, and I think it was Rahu's. I'd have to look it up actually. It was in 1940 something. Rahu's Saturn, I think it was. I think he got elected. I have to look. He got elected fairly early. But look at Rahu. Has dignity in Gemini here. Again, Rahu's Sun, another signature for politicians in the 5th house in his career chart. So very career elevation in this Rahu period. Jupiter period, he became president. Actually, he became president at the end of his Rahu period, like Donald Trump. He actually, another case where Rahu Mars actually 7 relationship here. That's something you'd have to look at this one closely, but he became president in his Rahu Mars period. And some people, if you know the history of John F. Kennedy, his father was kind of a big mocker, and supposedly there was a lot of there were poll problems like we have in Georgia today and Florida are not new, and they had them in Chicago in 1960 when he won the election too. And it's interesting that during his Rahu Mars period, where you have this Rahu Mars K2 Saturn Sun energy here, that he did become Mars is in the 11th here, with K2 having dignity here in his Rahu Mars period. So that was, he became president in Rahu Mars. Then he was assassinated in Jupiter Saturn, I believe. Yeah, and Jupiter is in the 12th house here. Again, loss of career, and Saturn is debilitated also in the 3rd house. So here you have a case where you have combination of 12th house and 3rd house in the D-10 showing end of career. It was a very serious end of career and one that we've never recovered from. And then finally, I think I have Martin Luther King. It's another kind of tragic person. I think I have Marilyn Monroe too. She's kind of interesting. Martin Luther King. He's Aries rising, Jupiter in the 1st. Also, Saturn in the 9th with Jupiter aspecting it in its own sign. This is a Sambandha relationship that I talked about. He got his doctorate degree in theology, again, Sag rising theology, of course, during Jupiter Saturn. He was assassinated during Mercury Jupiter. And Mercury and Jupiter are in a Parivartana Yoga in the D10 here. So let's look at that. Okay, Aries rising, Jupiter in the 1st. Again, put Jupiter in the 1st, you're going to get a preacher or a teacher or a priest. And he was certainly all of those things. He's got a lot of dignity here. And K2's Nakshatra, a very spiritual man. Again, he got his, during Jupiter Saturn period, sorry, dashes are not right here. Anyway, I don't know why the dashes aren't coming out as I thought they were supposed to come out. Anyway, let's look at his D10 here. This is not correlating with my other data, so I'm wondering if I've got the wrong dated here. So let's go to Marilyn Monroe. I've got to double check this one. I apologize. I had done my work on that, and then now it's not. showing up. Okay, Marilyn Monroe also very powerful career. Took off in around 1954 during her Jupiter-Mercury period. Um, um, uh, I think she got really noticed around 1953, 1954. I think it was 1954. And she, tragically died in 1963 from a suspected killing, but it was claimed to be a suicidal overdose. But we have a Parivartana yoga, I believe, for the end of her career. Let me see. She died in Mars in the third house in the D-10 here. So, okay, Mars, even though Mars has dignity here in Scorpio, she actually, she died and her career ended at the same time, obviously, but she was still a star when she died. I forgot what her last movie was, but I think it was, and she died at the end of her in her Jupiter Rahu period, which is very tragic. Jupiter and Rahu have a 12 relationship here. Jupiter's a Marka for I'm sorry, for in the Virgo chart anyway, but Saturn's the Marka in this chart here. Okay, final questions, Brooke. You have a question?
No.
So, bottom line, look for 3/8 and 12s in the D10 chart for termination of career. Brooke, did you have a question?
Not really. I mean, you mentioned a number of things that I have. I have a stationary Mars, and I have planets in the 6th and the 8th in the D10, and I mean, I don't really. I would love to know what that means.
Well, it depends. See, everything is kind of a seed form. The question is, when is it going to manifest? It's going to manifest during certain dashas and certain transits.
I'm coming up on Rahu Mars in about a year, maybe sooner.
Rahu Mars is always like the biggest change you can go through in your life. You know that, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, usually, I mean, once, we have seen, we saw John F. Kennedy and President Trump both got elected president in Rahu Mars. And, Mars is Atmakarka for you. And not Atmakarka, is Yogakarka for you because it owns an angle and a trine. So for Cancers and Leos, Mars is generally a good planet. So Rahu Mars may not be as difficult. We have a 4 relationship here.
Notice how the Mars is at 0 speed.
Yeah, I can look that up. It's powerful. I think that's very supportive of for your career actually, because it owns the 10th house. So it could be that, like Donald Trump and JFK, that maybe Rahu Mars will put you into a very powerful career. We'd have to look at some other things, but we do have a 12 relationship in the D10 here. So I mean, what happens is sometimes you lose something to gain something else. I mean, Donald Trump lost his gig at The Apprentice, but he became president of the United States. JFK went from being a senator to being president of the United States. So, one would have to think a big change of career for Rahu Mars. And with stationary Mars and with Mars owning the 10th, one would think it would be positive. And Mars in your Jupiter, you have Jupiter in the 6th. In the D10, which would suggest that you still might end up working for other people, because the 6th house is everyday work. You might be happier in that new job with Jupiter in the 6th, in Aries, but I think you would still end up working for other people. I'm not sure you're gonna have some, there is a chance for something dramatic to elevate, at the end of December, that stationary Mars, but it might be a 1 year. It might be a 1 year thing too. We'll see.
Did you say this December?
No, December 2019.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to teach you a bunch of other techniques. I'm just for fun. I'm going to look ahead at your D60. When you really want to time stuff exactly, you end up having to go to the D60 if it's rectified. I think we didn't rectify your D60 yet.
I think it's correct because my birth certificate is pretty down to the minute.
Yeah, it's going to be a minute off or something, but in the work in the rectification lesson, I told you that you have to have K2 and the ascendant for people who are spiritual inclined or in Jyotish. You have to have K2 and the ascendant having aspects to each other, and in a Rashi Drishti in Jaimini astrology. And I'm using the mean nodes here, so we need to move it back a minute.
Did you do a 5-9 aspect to the first house?
Well, you don't look at Graha Drishti with this technique. You're looking at Rashi Drishti.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So basically, Capricorn aspects, Leo aspects Capricorn. Okay. So that's what we want here. So it is a minute. I have a minute earlier, and then we'd have to play with it. But anyway, if you get this chart right when we learn the D60 techniques, then you can look at Mula Dasha. This is a preview of coming attractions. There's a dasha called Mula Dasha, and it works. It works with the D60 chart if you have the D60 chart rectified, and you can read the D60 chart like Vimshotri Dasha, and you can get really amazing information. I've been playing with this lately since I learned it, and this is like the ultimate technique for getting really precise prediction information. But you've got to have the D60 perfect, and basically you're in your Mars period already in Mula Dasha. You went into your Mars period in 2014. And you're in it until 2032, and what you have to do is then read the D60 chart. Well, Mars is in the 5th house here, so yeah, it's a time. It's a time for it's Capricorn rising chart in the D60 chart. So Mars is not the best planet for Capricorn rising. We'll have to play with this when we get to Mula Dasha, but this ultimately becomes a major chart using Mula Dasha for predicting what's really going on in your life.
D60. I thought D60 was past life.
It is past life, but Parashara gives it a 5 level, which means it's more important than the Rashi chart or the Navamsha chart. Why is that? So to me that's fascinating, and I've just always been fascinated by it. And so what you have to look at, you also have to look at the deities in the D60, which I think I got rid of. I'm giving you a sneak preview. We're going to do this for everybody in December probably, or January. No, it's not telling me. Yeah, we have to look up deity number 40, which I don't know by heart. It's actually, what happens is the nature of the karma of the period will manifest based on whether the deity has a malefic or a benefic quality. And then if you learn the lessons of that deity quickly, then the period can go well. But it does have a malefic deity quality. So we're going to have to look up this deity and see what lessons we need to learn around him.
You know,
And
I,
then,
I, I do have a question that's been haunting me. Can I ask it?
sure.
Is it's about you said the ruler of the 12th house in the Karakamsha Lagna is very significator of the deity that you should sort of worship.
Right, for moksha, yes.
In my Karakamsha Lagna is a Scorpio with nothing in the 12th house. So Libra, so I'm assuming it's Lakshmi?
It's Venus. Yeah, we would like to see a strong aspect here. We don't have a Rashi Drishti aspect. And if we review that tape and the slides, there's 5 or 6 things that you look at if there's no planet in the 12th house. Lakshmi would certainly be the first candidate. The sun is also aspecting, a very strong sun from Leo is also aspecting the 12th house here. So that's a possibility. And Mercury, which connected to Vishnu, is also aspecting
Well,
here.
oh, I see. You're using Rashi Drishti.
Yeah.
In the
So
note, I listened to the lecture for the D-10 chart before class, and I noticed that you said the sun gives trinal aspects in Gemini.
yeah, it's one of those weird rules that I never knew until the last 3 or 4 years when I've been studying Jyotish. I don't. I mean, I just have to go with Sanjay Roth, who's got 500 years of tradition behind him teaching astrology, and he keeps pulling out all these amazing things. And when I look at them, they work. So that's all I could tell. It's just when we learn. Here's the thing. When we learn astrology, we have to learn like simple things because it's really overwhelming. And so then as the years go by, we have to unlearn a lot of the things that we thought because, there's exceptions and refinements. And then you find out a lot of the stuff that you learn doesn't work unless you learn all the advanced rules. And, and that's why it's like, an endless study. It is possible to get a grasp of it, but, it's like that.
Right. Okay.
But the sun, are you more attracted to Shiva or Lakshmi?
I think I'm more attracted to Lakshmi and Vishnu.
Vishnu. Yeah, that would make sense with Mercury and Venus. Now, the other thing that you look at would be the Lord of the Fifth, which is going to be Hanuman or Ketu, uh, and Mars is in Rahu's Nakshatra. Ketu is debilitated. Yeah, I usually go with what you're feeling. If you're attracted to Lakshmi, then listen to Lakshmi Lalita Sahasranam on Fridays. It's on YouTube. And see if that gives you a buzz. I find
That's a good way of determining. I find is what I get the a hit off of.
Yeah.
So I'll try that.
Yeah, try Vishnu Sahasranam on Wednesdays, and try Lakshmi Sahasranam on Fridays, and see which one gives you a better hit.
Lakshmi. Okay.
Okay. Everybody likes Lakshmi except for me. I'm still learning to like Lakshmi.
How do you? Oh, I found it. Okay.
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 Good. Okay. Final questions before my voice gives out. If not, I'll see you next week. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I'll send you some homework. There's a lot of material here. We only have 2 weeks to integrate it, so you're going to have to play with it on your own. And then we've got some fascinating stuff next week with deities. The deities in the D10 are just amazing for giving you insights. And I've got the slides on them already. You can look at that, and maybe I'll see if I can send you. You're going to have to kind of find them. You have to learn how to calculate them by hand, or you have to have a good computer program to calculate them. But I got them here on the board so that we could do that. Okay, guys, see you next week. Take care.